So today I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the work that we're doing with SBOMs, but mostly this is, again, asking you to do some stuff for me. Our software bill of materials, SBOM, is something that is in multiple jurisdictions and in multiple contexts, is something that adopters of software, users of software are required to have. The SBOM describes basically the licensing. It identifies dependencies, the licensing of dependencies. It's a tool that can be used to identify software that has vulnerabilities in it. By identifying the dependencies, we can identify dependencies that have known vulnerabilities, for example. There's all sorts of other information in the SBOM. It is ideally a one-stop shop for information about the components. And this is something that we could argue we did with our IP logs back in the day. And it's something that we lost as we adjusted our IP policy. So this is something, again, we've had before. So it's probably an old requirement resurrected that it will be more standard and more useful to the industry. Our hope was there was a lot of promise in some tools, and I believe that promise still exists to automate the generation of these SBOMs. The results so far have been mixed. We did experiment with something called ORT, and it, while promising, isn't quite ready to serve our needs. It's something we're going to continue to look at and poke at every once in a while to see if that's useful. We have a team that's looking at using SW360, which is a Eclipse project, to do some of this work, and a number of other efforts. But ultimately, our efforts to completely automate this, as I say here, I've had mixed results. Focus is being shifted now to helping our project teams generate SBOMs themselves. And there's some great tools actually that do a really good job. And as I said, we need your help. Part of this starts with metadata. The idea is that these SBOM tools, we have like a Maven plugin, for example, that I'll talk about in a minute, to generate something called Cyclone DX formatted SBOM. It uses metadata from your project to do that. Now, for most of our projects, this is relatively straightforward. When you start to do funky things in your build, like pull content and pull it apart and grab pieces of it and shove pieces of it into random corners, it starts to break down. If you grab random JavaScript and shove it into some location, again, those are the kinds of things that the automation doesn't track, and these are things that we're going to have to look at and figure out how to do specially. But we believe that we're going to get major we get a lot of success out of just making sure that our project metadata is as correct as possible, and then using these automated tools. I say correct, I mean correct and complete. We've not generally put too much pressure on projects to specify metadata, complete metadata in their products, but now is we're well past the time to do that, and this is something that really kind of part of just being good neighbors. For example, if you specify whatever metadata you specify in Maven is stuff that actually gets surfaced in the user interface at Maven Central. So somebody looking at your content can very easily figure out what your licenses are. It's also the case that with all of these tools to automate the generation of SBOMs and automate discovery of content and licenses, and again, other information about content, like where it comes from, URLs pointing to repositories and issue trackers and whatnot. By providing this, it makes it when other people incorporate their content, our content, into theirs, they will have an easier time of generating this stuff. So again, just some good neighbor stuff. Now, I'm showing an example here, and a lot of us, statistically speaking, most of you should be doing stuff with Java and Maven. That's a major part of our major technology here at the Eclipse Foundation. Specifying licenses in what I've observed to be the standard way doesn't give a complete answer. If we have a single license, it's relatively straightforward. When you express multiple licenses, it's not entirely clear how they're combined. So, for example, this is the Jakarta Enterprise Beans API POM, which is a well specified. This is a very complete POM file that accompanies the product. It specifies licenses in a very standard and typical way. The problem is when you do this, it gives me a list of licenses, but it doesn't express how they're combined. We know that a consumer of this content can consume it under the EPL or the GPL2 with a class path exception. But that's not expressed explicitly, and it really could be an and. The way licenses are combined can be challenging, and making this as easy as possible for consumers is what we need to do. And again, for make meaningful generation of SBOMs. So the Maven documentation itself actually says use in the name field, use an SPDX identifier or an SPDX expression. So rather than specify two license clauses here, we have one that precisely describes the license of this component, and that information then would again get propagated to Maven Central, so that somebody looking at the component can see very specifically how it's licensed. That information will get captured and put into SBOMs that are generated. That information gets passed downstream. Very easy for somebody consuming this content to automate the discovery of licenses without having to use a tool like scan code to scan the software. They may choose to do that, but again, with this, the intention is expressed exactly without room for a requirement for interpretation. I assume that if there's questions, you'll drop them into the chat, and I will look at the chat briefly. Cool thing. Oh, excellent. Okay, good. So Cyclone DX, using it itself, again, I'm still sticking with Maven right now. It's a plugin. It goes into your build plugins. Here, I'm actually expressing more configuration than we need to. You don't actually, the configuration, that's all default configuration. Basically, what happens is this, adding this to your build will automatically then, well, Maven then will generate the SBOM for you. And our observation has been that these SBOMs are just included in the artifacts that get uploaded to the software repository. So if you look at the dash license tool, for example, in our Nexus instance, there are Cyclone DX SBOMs as artifacts in the repository. They just get propagated up. It's, basically add this to your build file and magic happens. I got noticed that the JGit project did this, set this up the other day, and it seems to be working pretty well. My observation is that this doesn't add significant time to the build process. It's on order of a fraction of a second of added time. So, again, this is something we would like project teams to try out on their own builds and provide us with feedback. Certainly, we're looking for what are the major problems. We have Francisco on our team here is working with the Cyclone DX folks, giving them feedback based on some of the experiences we've had with this. We've done this. We've experimented with this on all of the Jakarta EE API projects when we want to, and we're expanding that to a few more of the projects there. This is right now we're focused more on the libraries. The next step is to start looking at bigger things like Glassfish itself or the Eclipse IDE. These are slightly different beasts. And we're going to, the next step after, if we can get some experience with this, our next step is to get some help, get your help figuring out how to do those, what we do with those larger products that are aggregates of all this information. The just to make sure that our NPM friends are feeling included, we've done some work with that as well. My knowledge, our knowledge and experience in this area is a little bit is limited. Let's not qualify it. So whatever help we can get here would be great. This is something that I've experimented with, and I realized that I've presented the example that I couldn't actually get to work. But I did manage to use this to generate SBOMs for the Sprati project. Again, I didn't really get the Thea one working. So I've got a question from Dennis. Some questions regarding specifying metadata. We use Typopolis build. Can we put it in the manifest instead to specify the relevant information rather than in POM files? The answer is, I don't know. Dealing with Eclipse plugins is another thing that we actually have some open questions on that we would like some help with. For one, because plugins specify version ranges, it's not clear to us what we would put in an SBOM. Again, the dependency for a particular plugin in isolation, it's not entirely, like I said, it's not entirely clear that an SBOM makes sense. We're thinking that it's the aggregate of plugins that actually winds up being interesting, because when they're combined together, we resolve to very specific dependencies. Anyway, that's an open question, and Dennis, I'll definitely include you in that discussion. I hope that answer is probably as unsatisfying as I think it is, but hopefully that gets us to the next step. We have some open opportunities. Speaking of which, tools use license information from components. These are often complete. So when we're pulling in third-party dependencies, content that we pull off of NPM, content that we pull off of Maven Central or other repositories doesn't necessarily have complete metadata, which means that we have an opportunity to fill in that incomplete metadata. What I've asked you to do right now, for example, does not consider the information that we've gathered about licenses in our IP lab. So one of the opportunities here is to figure out how to capture that license information more completely and correctly by our curations. Dealing with funky builds, again, another open opportunity. I mentioned this a little bit earlier. I won't labor the point. Builds that do non-standard things are a challenge to automate the process of generation. Support for other languages. The Cyclone DX people have provided a lot of plugins for lots of different technologies. And these are things that the Eclipse Foundation is going to be able to provide some support for, but we're going to be looking at committers engaged with those technologies to help us. As I mentioned in response to Dennis's question, SBOMs for Eclipse platform plugins is a big open question. Again, I have an issue open for that. I will actually follow up with that, and we're trying to get the architect. We're going to get the Architecture Council engaged on that, and again, work with committers. Again, I think what's interesting here is the composition of plugins. So generating an SBOM for an IDE, Eclipse IDE. Of course, the challenge with that is the Eclipse IDE is dynamic. As we update, as we add plugins to it, the SBOM would change. So anyway, we got some thoughts about that, and we'll look up setting up some kind of task force to power through that. And then again, just more generally, SBOMs for products. So again, these are things that we continue to investigate and work on, but at this point, I don't have much more to say about those things. Aside, I just wanted to draw awareness to this. We have been using internally, well, for our purposes to express dependencies, we've been using clearly defined IDs. We picked that basically because, well, clearly defined exist, and we're friends with them, and we were working with them for a while. And package URL was something that didn't actually exist when wasn't broadly used when we were adopting this technology. At some point, we are going to switch to using package URL, which, based on my observation, has one. It is a means of specifying in a consistent manner components that's language independent. Maven gavs are fantastic at describing a particular Maven thing, but useless when it comes to describing an NPM thing or a cargo thing. So we're again, we're going to look at this. Another opportunity here is, at present, we're not aware of any decisions having been made about what the package URL format is to describe an Eclipse plugin. So that's something to think about. But the form is basically like a URL, and I've given a couple of examples here. The Dash license tools version 1.03 is expressed there as a Maven package, and then Sprotty core is expressed as an NPM package. Again, these are just that's a URL or a URI that uniquely identifies a particular component. One of the things, if you've been playing in this space, that you'll notice is missing is that there's no notion of source or where it's actually stored. It's technically possible that the same Maven gav could be used to represent two different things in different repositories. In practice, that's not something we've observed a lot, but it's certainly possible. That's one thing that the clearly defined format tries to address, and does a good job of it, I guess. Anyway, package URL spec there's a GitHub repository with it there. There's more just an FYI that this is something we're looking at and will likely switch over to as time permits, rather than clearly defined. Anyway, that is really what I'd intended to talk about today. If there are any questions, I'm happy to field them. Is this something that anybody on the call feels that they can do for their projects right now? Again, keeping in mind that Eclipse platform or Eclipse plugins we're still a little bit behind on those, and they're going to need to look at it. There is an issue open on Tycho to try and be helpful here, but I don't know Tycho well enough to comment on that. I can try to find a pointer to that for those of you that are interested.
Yeah, so Wayne, I think the main thing is going to need a more concrete demand for it to spend the time adding it to the projects. So I know that it's been talked about as a generic. This is going to become a thing, but it isn't quite there yet. So
yeah, we see this as part of. There's a number of different efforts underway that I'm not prepared to talk about today, but like, when we look at things like the CRA in Europe, part of the fallout from that will be a requirement to generate SBOMs. There are a number of departments. U.S. government, for example, has been issuing there's requirements for them to have these SBOMs. So we're going to try and collect all of those together to make sure that yeah, motivation is important. I get that.
In the meantime, I'll pay attention to where it's going and be ready to hopefully move fast once we need it.
Good. So you'll notice that most of what I talked about today, though, was just getting our metadata in order. Honestly, I just think that's goodness anyway. You'll probably, one of the things, you'll probably start seeing some pull requests here and there as a team here start looking at things. Again, worst case scenario is nobody winds up caring about SBOMs, but we wind up having much better metadata. That seems like a win-win.
But once that first pull request comes into one of my projects, then it's easy also to see where I've been going wrong and fix all the other ones up. So
sure,
that works well for me too.
Yeah, I think a lot of what the work you do is also Eclipse plugins, and we don't have a good answer quite yet for that.
Yeah, I have a bunch
Emilio,
of NPM stuff too.
Oh, of course, yes. Emilio, you have a question?
Yeah, I was just going to say, if it's as easy as adding a plugin to the Maven POM, I'd be happy to try it out on GeoMesa.
Yeah, that would be great if you could do that. And then if report back, if you can report to, I guess if you can just send a note to EMO saying, telling your experiences, or open up an issue on the, I sent a link to a repository. If you can, if you can comment back any feedback, that would be great.
So it sounds like right now nothing would be consuming these SBOMs.
At this point, we are trying to set us up for success when consumers start becoming available, or when people start actively looking for them.
Okay.
But I would really rather not be scrambling at the last minute. Again, this is about, we're trying to set ourselves up for success. And the comments about nobody actually wants these yet are understood. I'm clearly getting different pressure than you are, so I need to. It's on me then to provide better motivation for this. I have a question. Is there a way of tracking what tools were used to build a product in case there was a supply chain attack? I believe that this actually is captured, or can be captured, in the SBOMs. That's a great question, and we should open up an issue to make sure we track that. And I will take your exact words there, Andrew, and I will create an issue and make sure that we capture that. Okay. Are there any other questions before we wrap?
Thanks, Wayne.
I'd like to stop the recording.